Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. So many brave women, and we're very excited to have you all here to listen to some really brave women who are out there on the front line fighting for us and our reproductive rights. And I want to start first, we're going to have Representative Shusterman present, followed by Ashley Underwood of Equity Forward, and then also Tara Murtha from the Women's Law Project. And they're out here like fighting. And today I looked at their presentation, was blown away by how many bills are pending that I didn't even know about. So settle in, get your wine ready, and we'll get ready to go. We're going to start first with Representative Shusterman. She was first elected back in 2018, so she has now survived 3 election campaigns and is a pro at this point. She's representing the 157th, and her life experience, she was a female entrepreneur and a mother. Her focus is on common sense politics, which is truly what we need right now. She wants ordinary people to have a voice in their government. I'm very happy she's here. We're very lucky to have her in Harrisburg. And I'd like to turn it over to you now, Representative Shusterman.
Thank you so much for having me. I wrote this in the chat, but I think it only got to Tara. It's just incredible to be among all these heroes. It takes all of us working all the time because for some reason, legislators really just want to keep women down across the country. And we are powerful when we unite together and work hard to make sure that we are not only heard, but that the government services are servicing girls and women. So I'm passionate about it. It's why I ran for office. I used to work in television and then ran my own digital firm. And I'm now 100% serving you, serving women, making sure we make some change, because at this rate, we're going to have to work really hard on that. So it's an honor to chat here today. What prompted me to run for office are these issues, the fact that they lack transparency, the fact that there's backroom deals and women being thrown under the bus during budget negotiations is why I continue to come back, just fighting and making sure that we have people like Joanna McClinton in the room, our new first Black female speaker of Pennsylvania's House. So I'm sorry, I'm really emotional. So now I'm going to get right into the reason we're all here tonight. The extremist attacks on women in Pennsylvania and at the federal level. I want to start with just a couple things at the federal level, then dive into issues specific to PA. Republican-controlled legislatures and Republican governors across the country seem to be racing to outdo each other for more and more extreme laws, from banning transgender care for minors to banning certain books from schools to banning abortion access. Republicans keep making power grabs to try to control women and women's families. And you might say, but it happens in Florida, those people, it's different. And it won't happen here. The problem is they're passing around legislation. And I want to say this, they're not very creative. They all pass around similar legislation. They might just add a little bit more extremism to it. So when you see that Wyoming Republicans who already outlawed surgical abortions, they just passed that law, which the governor just signed, for a complete ban on medical abortions, you know other states are picking up that law next. And so it will spread across the country, affecting millions and millions of women and their families. 21, just in South Carolina last week, 21 GOP lawmakers proposed the death penalty for women who have abortions. So the reason I'm telling you this is not to agitate. It's just fact. And it's the facts we're dealing with and why the work that you're doing and the work that you're spreading to your neighbors and you're talking, maybe over the backyard fence has to include this topic. This is extreme. So this brings me to the particular federal item I wanted to highlight tonight, and that is the court case in Texas seeking to undo the FDA's approval of mifepristone, which is one of two medications used for medical abortion. Because it's a federal court and a decision by a Trump-appointed judge, it would affect the entire country, no matter our state laws. So in a nutshell, anti-abortion groups are judge shopping their way to federal abortion bans, despite their earlier and disingenuous claims that they want to leave it up to the state. They are covering every angle. And that's, once again, while the work here that you do is so important. So because we will no longer, it's probably going to go this way, we're no longer going to have the ability to use this particular medicine to have a medical abortion. People will be looking for surgical abortions if they can still access them, and that is going to put more demands on an already stressed abortion clinics. They're going to have to move out of their state, maybe go over several states, putting more stress on our limited abortion clinics. Okay, so let's take a deep breath. I'm serious, everyone, because this stuff can be a lot, and let's move on to Pennsylvania. Some of you probably heard about the constitutional amendment to ban abortion in PA that the Republicans in Harrisburg were trying to get on the statewide ballot. I can tell you that for now, this effort has not succeeded. This is thanks in no small part to all of you, along with the organizers or red, white, and blue and others who worked so hard to put Democrats in the majority in the PA House of Representatives. It was an honor. I personally got to serve on the House Democratic campaign side as co-chair. And I want to tell you, we knocked 1 million doors with advocates like you and our staff. And this was the #1 issue we encountered, the constitutional amendment to ban abortions. So we were able to defeat that and bring the legislature in the House to a majority for the Democrats, but our work isn't done. We have to work across the state to elect Democrats to serve at every level in government and to continue to support and protect our rights and reproductive choices. I'm going to kind of flip a little bit forward to the bills that I am currently and the subject of our hour, where we're going to talk about defunding deceptive pregnancy centers. I suggest that you Google John Oliver and listen to his piece, Deceptive Pregnancy or just wrong non-medical clinics are even making their way to the mainstream. So Google John Oliver, he talks about it, and your mind will be blown with where this money is going that's supposed to help women with their medical needs and their prenatal care, and is instead not helping them at all. So for a little background, 1 out of 6 babies born in PA is born to a mother who hasn't received adequate prenatal care. And also, the maternal mortality rate for Black women in PA is 3 times that of white women. Knowing those stats, next, I need to quickly explain what a crisis pregnancy center are and what they're not. First of all, crisis pregnancy centers, I call them deceptive pregnancy centers, or you can call them fake clinics, are all over the state of Pennsylvania, primarily in low-income areas and in maternal healthcare deserts. Maternal healthcare deserts are places where women have no ERs or hospitals or clinics to go to talk about their pregnancy and to get prenatal care. So not just talk, get the care. So in fact, deceptive pregnancy centers outnumber abortion clinics 9-to-1 in Pennsylvania. Let that really sink in. So a woman is pregnant. Maybe she's going through an ectopic pregnancy, and instead of walking into a medical facility where she can talk about her options and receive medical care, She instead is walking into one of these deceptive pregnancy centers and not given any medical care and actually given false medical information. So none of the deceptive pregnancy centers in PA provide contraceptive care. None of the state-funded deceptive pregnancy centers in our state provide prenatal care. Even more shocking is that they receive $7 million of taxpayer money per year to deceive women. I've got to say that again, like I did all this talking, but that is what this is about. As taxpayers, we pay our taxes, and $7 million is going to women to deceive them. And to me, that is absolutely outrageous, because when a woman is pregnant, she is often very, very vulnerable. And now she is walking into a place she thinks is going to help her, and she is not receiving that care. So how did this happen now that we're in the majority and we knocked the doors and we got here in the House? Well, Republicans have controlled the legislature in Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, and they kept pushing this funding, and it was buried deep into the budget line. So women were thrown under the bus during the budget. And to me, that is fraud. It's outrageous to deceive women like that, you know, to constantly deceive women, especially when they need help. So what do these centers do? Well, they give out diapers and baby supplies, and they provide what they call counseling, trying to convince women not to have abortions, even telling them false things like abortions cause cancer and depression, and you could lose your eyesight getting an abortion. They often give you a pregnancy test, the kind you could buy at a drugstore, but no prenatal care. They don't care if the woman's healthy, how the woman's feeling. They give them zero prenatal care. Yet still 40% of these state-funded centers in PA also offer abortion pill reversal. And I just want to tell you that does not exist. So they are further deceiving these women. An abortion pill reversal is an attempt by these centers to deceive women, try to convince women that they can reverse their in-process medical abortions through inappropriate medical advice and by giving medications without proper medical supervision, all with taxpayer funds. So I find this unacceptable, and I've introduced legislation to defund these deceptive organizations. So you might now ask, okay, thanks, Melissa. That's a lot of heavy information. I'm feeling kind of down right now. What can I do? Well, let me tell you what you can do. You can email your state reps and senators. It's really easy. You Google who is my PA state rep, and it'll take you to find your state legislator, your state senator webpage where you enter your address and their names pop up. You click on their names, you're taken to their office website where you can get their contact information. You can call them, you can email them. You can get a bunch of friends, sit around drinking wine and call and email them together. Tell them you want them to work to stop the fraudulent use of taxpayer funds. Tell them you want to stop the deception of women via state-funded crisis pregnancy centers or fake pregnancy centers, and ask your state rep to co-sign my bill to defund these deceptive organizations, but also ask them to co-sign my bill funding family planning providers. So awareness of this issue is gaining traction. Once again, it's gaining traction across the country and even in pop culture. And we need our advocates to bring up the heat on this. I will put my call to action in the chat. And that's me. I hope, I think you can feel my passion about this. And what I'm learning from speaking to people around this issue is we can really just talk about fraud of tax dollars. It's a really good way to go. You start with that. And also preying on women who need medical prenatal care. Prenatal care includes, actual medical intervention and also the option for abortion.
Thank you very much for being here. Next up, we have Ashley Underwood of Equity Forward. Ashley is a reproductive justice and public health advocate. She has an extensive background, which is amazing to me, working to improve maternal and sexual health outcomes. And people forget about one and the other. They're together. This is all together and matters. She implements programs and oversees development. Previously with Equity Forward, she also had the position of being a research assistant and a senior research person. She also worked for NARAL, which I find very, very impressive. I love that you were there before in Ohio, and there's a lot happening in Ohio right now. And Ashley also has her master's degree in public health from Case Western Reserve. So please warmly welcome Ashley. She's going to give us a little more detail. She was very involved in creating the research around Pennsylvania and other states. And she's going to give us a new term to use tonight instead of just deceptive pregnancy centers.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for such a warm introduction. I'm the director of Equity Forward. We produce opposition and investigative research on human rights, gender equity, and reproductive rights. I don't know if any of you all are Netflix watchers, but the best way to think about us is Lady Bridgerton of the Repro movement. We collect receipts through public records research and opposition research to really debunk the claims of the anti-abortion movement and really highlight just how connected and strategic they are in their overall goals and missions. So yeah, that's who we are. So as Sherry said, we do use different terminology to describe these entities. There isn't a right or a wrong way to describe them. We just happen to use the term anti-abortion center, or AAC. So AAC is an umbrella term for all organizations seeking to push the agenda of the anti-abortion movement in our communities. I say in our communities with emphasis because AACs exist everywhere, in red states and blue states and purple states, in the most progressive bubbles. AACs are existing in New York City. They're literally everywhere. And so another way to look at these entities is as the storefronts of the anti-abortion movement. The term AAC is not solely a reference to their activity of delaying and deterring people from abortion care. We know that sometimes these sort of places are the only place in town that are dispensing formulas or diapers and helping people in need. And we also know that a sizable percentage of people who are interacting with these centers are doing so with the intent of receiving some sort of material good. And so again, when we say anti-abortion, we are referring to the many moving pieces of the anti-abortion movement that back these centers. We're talking and calling out the fact that the volunteers who manage these places have largely been mobilized by anti-abortion organizations such as Right to Life, for example. These entities, even though they may look grassroots and look like they just sprouted out of nowhere, they're typically involved with like million-dollar networks such as CareNet or Heartbeat International or Obria. And even the physicians, when these places are actually staffed by medical physicians, they're typically affiliated with groups that are out of who don't really have the same level of respect as like mainstream medical professional organizations because of the rhetoric that they push that is largely linked to the anti-abortion movement. And so yeah, a lot of these places, they offer different things, they offer different services. Some may have medical professionals, some may not. And so to just clearly dictate what they are, we use the term AAC, Anti-Abortion Center, just to acknowledge that these places basically are the public relations for the anti-abortion movement. We want to use a term that is easily and quickly identified that these places are ideologically motivated. And just last year, the Associated Press updated their style guidebook to encourage journalists to use the term AAC too. So it's fairly a new term. We didn't think of this just randomly, we did a little bit of research and focus group and polling to get a better idea of like what term lands with people. And this is what we came up with, and this is what we use. So AAC, Anti-Abortion Center, is what we use. I am showing this map to put into context the national problem of AACs, particularly those which are publicly funded. A2A programs are funded A2A are alternatives to abortion programs. These are programs such as the one that exists in Pennsylvania that utilize taxpayers' dollars to siphon money from the state to individual anti-abortion centers. Sometimes this is pulled from general revenue funds, and then sometimes this is pulled from TANF dollars. So TANF is temporary assistance for needy families. This is a pool of money that should be providing direct cash assistance to people experiencing financial emergencies. It's one of the only federal programs that provide this sort of cash assistance for people to be able to use the money for what they need. And instead, we see states using TANF dollars to fund their A2A programs. The practice actually originated in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was the first state to permit the use of TANF dollars, and an organization that I'll talk about in a few slides, which is also based in Pennsylvania, were the originators of this practice. Real Alternatives is a predominantly taxpayer-funded organization that is based in Harrodsburg. Real Alternative distribute funds to anti-abortion centers. While they claim to help people and want to help parents, we just know that it's not true. For example, Real Alternatives is about 90% funded by taxpayer dollars, and their three top executives bring in a combined $700,000 a year, which is just outlandish. If we're thinking of any state, but particularly in the Midwest, I'm originally from Ohio, you really don't need that type of money to survive. So the fact that they are siphoning this sort of TANF dollars into their own pockets is just particularly cruel and disgusting and outlandish. So one thing I will quickly tell you a few quick things about Real Alternatives. They have been the contractor of the state's Alternatives to Abortion program for 20 years. So since the program's inception, Real Alternatives has been a contractor. Real Alternatives runs programs in Indiana. Still to this day, they're still a contractor of Indiana's A2A program. They previously were a contractor in Michigan. However, Michigan moved to defund the program, which I will talk a little bit about in a few minutes. The other thing to know about Real Alternatives is that they consult with other states. And what they do when they consult with these states is they help them to get their A2A program off the ground and help them figure out ways to have TANF dollars fund their program. One of Real Alternatives' most successful states that they have contracted with is Texas. And Texas currently manages the most robust publicly funded A2A program. Their program runs at about $100 million per 2 years. So really outlandish numbers. So another thing about Real Alternatives that I would quickly like to talk on is that, again, Equity Forward, we are able to incline and glean more information about how these centers are using their dollars through public records requests. Typically, it's a very straightforward process of figuring out which agency in the state oversees the Alternatives to Abortion program, and will make a request for access to budgets, grant narratives, grant reporting, that sort of information. We did the same thing in Pennsylvania in 2017, so about 6 years ago now. And that resulted in what was about the longest running right to know lawsuit in the state of Pennsylvania, because Real Alternatives did not want to disclose what they were doing with the money, and how they were using those dollars. So yeah, during 2017, we made a very simple right to know request, and we even we weren't able to necessarily win that case. The courts decided that Real Alternatives did not have to disclose these secret contracts that they have. And basically what they're doing is they have these things called PDAAs, and this is in the most simple terms, is a contract that states that the organizations that they are helping to help implement these programs have to give them a percentage back of this public dollars as being managers of their program. And it's essentially a kickback scheme with, again, public dollars. And so while we weren't able to gain access to those contracts through our lawsuit, the courts did grant us access to some documents. We're still in the process of trying to gain access to those documents. But the point of this is all to say is that Real Alternatives is extremely shady, and you would think that an organization that touts itself as using money to help pregnant and parenting people would be happy to disclose how they're using their money. And the fact that they have been so secretive and have been so tight with their records and with their documents kind of leads us to the fact that they're doing something that they should not be doing with those dollars. Another thing that Equity Forward does is we produce pretty extensive profiles on some of these organizations. So we do have a profile on Real Alternatives in our Pro-Lies directory that Shakia has shared in the chat. She's also shared a link to the press release from the original court hearing that if you all are interested in learning more about that. One tool, as we're talking about ways to get involved, one tool for change is public records research. At Equity Forward, we are somewhat experts of sending out public records, but public records requests, but it literally anyone can do this. Like, this is, again, another activity that you could do during a girls' night in if you were so inclined. So through state's sunshine laws, the public can request information and records from the government to better understand how it functions. Equity Forward, we began our formal state level alternatives to abortion research in December 2020. It's been almost going on 3 years now of us sending and analyzing public records in our target states. And we have every intention to continue this project. We just sent out a new batch of FOIAs earlier in the year. Via public records research, we have been able to uncover outsized influences of anti-abortion groups at the state level and reveal the true agenda of anti-abortion centers by analyzing how they use their public dollars and analyzing how they operate. So I will show you an example of what a public records FOIA production looks like in this next slide. So this is an example of a production that we received from the state of Ohio. And basically, if you follow the red arrows, it's just showing you how little of this budget for Ohio's alternatives to abortion program with this particular sub-grantee, Elizabeth New Life Center, which is like a system of anti-abortion centers in the state of Ohio. They received $1.85 million through this grant to do whatever they wanted to do at their anti-abortion centers. And again, this is an organization that claims to help people, but if we are looking at the receipts, we can see that out of that nearly $2 million, only about less than 16,000 of it was spent on participant education, and less than $44,000 of it was spent on participant support. And what participant support means in these sort of grant agreements is the dispense, giving out diapers, formula, onesies, clothes. So we could see just how little of these dollars that they are spending on actually helping people. The large majority of the monies that they receive go towards personnel and overhead costs. This is another example. So I always like to take my time with this example. In November 2020, Governor DeWine in Ohio issued an executive order. So again, think November 2020, this is like the peak of the COVID pandemic. He released additional funds through his Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. Elizabeth New Life Center received additional funding in addition to the $1.85 million that they had already received. They received additional funding through this other grant, and they still opted to spend the majority of their dollars on salaries, marketing, and paying rent for their facilities. Again, at the height of the pandemic, an AAC that purports to help all of these people spent less than $4,000 on its participants. It's often said that our spending choices reflect our values, and it's just impossible for these centers to say that they value life and they value families and they value people when they are literally taking money, TANF dollars, again, that is set aside to support families in need and instead using it to support their business endeavors. A2A contractors, alternatives to abortion contractors, they are often subject to extremely little oversight, extremely little reporting requirements. And again, something that you all can do is to demand oversight, demand review, demand defunding of these programs. And lastly, before I leave, because I don't want to take up too much time, but the other thing that you could do is just talk about them. So many people do not know what a crisis pregnancy center is or what an anti-abortion center is. They don't know how to identify one. They don't even know that these places exist. I know for me, when I first learned about them, I was shocked that someone could set up and pretend to be a doctor or a medical facility and walk around with white coats and have no sort of licensing requirements. So just even getting the word out about that these places exist is like one of the best things that you can do. And then lastly, I want to leave on a good note. And so I previously stated that Rural Alternatives was running a program in Michigan. They previously did that, but after it was found that Rural Alternatives had violated its contract, it did not provide the services it claimed it would, Governor Gretchen Whitmer rescinded its funding in 2019. This win happened thanks to combined efforts from us at Equity Forward and Campaign for Accountability. Equity Forward, we got the public records, we ran a campaign, cleverly titled it Real Waste in the state of Michigan to make noise about the misuse of public dollars. And then Campaign for Accountability, they filed an official complaint in the state, which called on government officials to investigate and terminate the state's contract with Rural Alternatives. And again, in 2019, the program was removed from the state's budget. And so I say that to say that although these entities are ran by very powerful people and they're very well funded, it is possible to get them out of our communities. And Michigan is an example of that. So thank you. I am done now.
Thank you very much, Ashley. That was very, very educational. Thank you. And you really did end on a perfect note. Michigan was successful, so I have every reason to believe Pennsylvania can also be successful. Next up, we're going to hear from Tara Murtha, and she's the Director of Strategic Communication at the Women's Law Project in Philadelphia. It's a public interest legal organization. They're devoted to advancing and defending gender justice in Pennsylvania and beyond. She's also the co-author of the landmark report on the anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers. And it's a great, I think it was 72 pages, the report. And we'll make sure you all know how to get a copy of it for yourself because it is amazing. But 72 pages called Designed to Deceive, a study of the crisis pregnancy center industry in 9 states. And Pennsylvania is truly shamed in that report. So Tara, I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you again, and so good to hear from Rep. Shusterman. Thank you for your work on this. Obviously, being also an advocate for defunding these centers in Pennsylvania, I appreciate your work, as well as always awesome to hear Ashley about Equity Forward's super important work in this area. So I am going to talk a little bit about CPC's and the Design to Deceive work, and then also just kind of broaden out to some of what we're watching for this legislative session that is just getting going and is oh so important in Pennsylvania. I did want to make a note. I saw in the chat a question about TANF, just to underscore how grotesque it is for these anti-abortion executives to be dipping their hands into TANF funds. TANF is a federal, called welfare, federal grant program. It's a block grant given to states and states have discretion about how to use it, but it's designed to be cash assistance for vulnerable families in crisis. It's temporary. It's to give you an idea about, you need to possess less than $1,000 in assets to qualify. A family of 3 would at max obtain $403 a month, so not even bringing you up to the federal poverty line. I mean, these are like the safety net, especially in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania lawmakers canceled the state-based cash assistance program in 2019 because they felt the recipients, again, people with disabilities, families in crisis, they weren't quite sure if they were being responsible with that money. And yet we give millions of dollars away to anti-abortion activists in Pennsylvania. Also shameful about the TANF program is that only 25 out of 100, every 100 Pennsylvanians that qualify for TANF are actually obtaining it because it's cannibalized for these other reasons. So anti-abortion executives earning the exorbitant Harrisburg salaries that Ashley told you about are literally taking money out of children's mouths and out of and you also, pregnant people qualify for TANF as well, and away from pregnant people, siphoning that out to anti-abortion executives who promise to oversee a barrier system, a network that promises to be really devoted to helping the very people they just took the money from, right? So that's the TANF scheme. So unfortunately, Pennsylvania has pioneered that program as well as giving away millions and millions of dollars via state contracts. It's more than $100 million at this point since the founding has been siphoned out and given to real alternatives. I do want to just briefly note so we can all be vigilant. Shouldn't happen here this session, but as Rep. Shusterman pointed out, the anti-abortion movement it's very top down. There's a couple of organizations and strategists that create these boilerplate bills that just get rubber stamped in the states and distributed through the states. So the latest and greatest swindle here of taking our tax dollars to target pregnant people with misinformation is via these tax credit bills. Again, not to take too much time on it, but it is alarming right now. I've just been tracking in 5 states tax credit legislation that would, via tax credits, funnel even more public funding into CPCs. And the anti-abortion strategists that came up with this are really excited because that means even less oversight. And also, of course, that funding is then more obscured from public view than even the TANF funding and the state contracts. So I'll go a little bit into, again, the CPC work, and then just touch on some, on a good note, proactive policies that we're really excited to support this session, and then just briefly touch on litigation that you should be aware of that can inform and potentially even transform reproductive rights and abortion access in Pennsylvania. And I jumped right in there without mentioning that if you're not familiar with my organization, Women's Law Project, we did hear in the intro there, but the relevant piece here is that the attorneys that I work with, who I'm obsessed with, they're amazing, have been representing abortion providers in Pennsylvania for decades in both impact litigation as well as daily compliance matters, which is a task when there's 1,237 pages of statutes and regulations governing abortion care in Pennsylvania. And of course, endless attempts at introducing even more. This is a report. The product is a collaboration of my organization as well as the 4 other state regional-based public interest law centers that focus on gender justice. And this is just a brief overview of the findings. It is an extensive, detailed report. There is an executive summary. So I'll be including all the links in the follow-up, as well as fact sheets on individual states, including Pennsylvania. But this is the big picture. We endeavored this because we saw what was happening with Roe, of course, and also had been very concerned about the crisis pregnancy center industry, which I use on purpose because CPCs, anti-abortion centers, have several very distinct purposes. None of them are saving babies, but one of the very big ones, as we can see here, is to funnel public money into the anti-abortion movement. They function, as Ashley said, as storefronts in many ways, and that's one of them. Typically, they're networked in with the big national and international anti-abortion groups. That also represents a huge privacy concern. Most CPC, this is not your grandpa's CPC, okay? They're digitally sophisticated, they're networked in with the major groups. They intake all kinds of information. You don't even need to walk through the door in order for them to get your information. They do it if they have chats pop up. If you click on a CPC on Facebook, they'll know. And they funnel all your information, including, of course, pregnancy status, menstrual data, pregnancy intention, a very dangerous bit of information in the United States today, and all funnel it into one shared big database to track everybody who's ever interacted with CPC. And there is evidence that CPCs have shared, for example, menstrual data with law enforcement to reinforce prosecution. So the networking, the digital sophistication is dangerous in a lot of ways, but right now the privacy aspect, the surveillance, it's fundamentally a surveillance dragnet for pregnant people in the United States, as well as a sophisticated barrier to prevent us from accessing not just abortion care, but contraception as well, and prenatal care, for that matter, any legitimate medical, since they don't provide typically any medical care, anyone seeking legitimate medical care, it's an unnecessary stop on their way. So we found, almost 64% providing, pushing out false and biased medical claims. That's another function. It's not a coincidence that you see the same claims over and over, abortion causes breast cancer, things like that. Because they're digitally networked, they get their websites like little website kits. And the one page they're not allowed to edit is the page with all the misinformation about abortion and contraception, right? So they function to distribute and pump these coordinated anti-abortion talking points into communities. You can see their main, their lures in our free pregnancy test. Typically, that is an over-the-counter stick that you would buy at the drugstore. That's very much on purpose. They got in trouble, legal trouble, for practicing medicine without a license in the 80s, for practicing medicine without a license. And so they're legally advised. This is how expert they are at evading regulatory frameworks. You hand the person a urine stick, they use your bathroom, you're not diagnosing them. Ergo, they're diagnosing themselves in front of you. So that's how sophisticated they are at evading all of these medical, what would normally be governed by medical regulations. Similarly, the ultrasound is a non-diagnostic ultrasound. Like you can go to the mall and get a souvenir at Christmas time if you're pregnant, that type of thing. They use it in a way to promote bonding and to just as a coercive tool for your pregnancy decision making. There's no medical purpose to that ultrasound. So to dive into Pennsylvania, as Rep. Shusterman told you, maternal mortality and morbidity is a crisis across the country. It is a crisis in Pennsylvania. There is a huge racial disparity, and yet we are funneling all of this money to not just that they don't provide any prenatal care, as you could see, 0% of the state-funded CDCs in Pennsylvania provide prenatal care, but of course it's an attrition of funds that could be going toward legitimate care. Most disturbingly, this issue with abortion pill reversal, it's not tested to be safe, never mind effective, or its purported, attempt to stop an abortion in progress. And that all goes, every single CPC, no matter who they're affiliated with, that program's all linked to the one major organization that has the database, okay? So you're literally getting people to call you and say, I started an abortion, and it goes to the database. So the fact that Pennsylvania, it enrages me that my tax dollars are promoting something that a practice that medical experts call unmonitored experimentation on low-income pregnant people. And to put a really fine point on it, more than 90% of people who volunteer, and it's mostly volunteers, except for the well-paid executives at CPCs, are demographically speaking, middle class, incomes over $100,000, white women without jobs. And the CPCs have programs targeting Black women. So the state is funding a program of white people targeting Black women for what's called medical experimentation and surveillance, of course. So this is reason enough alone to be engaged in this work and demand that these centers are defunded. And also I'll note that 41% is higher than the privately funded ones. So in Pennsylvania, the state-funded CPCs are actually promoting abortion pill reversal at a higher rate than privately funded CPCs. I'll just review, you'll get the slide deck and follow-up materials, so I'll kind of just be aerial view here. There are 3 bills that I just want to highlight that are proactive, good bills to support this session. This is another crisis pregnancy center related bill by Senator Schwenk that, you know, there's 2 different ways to go about this. We want them defunded, but while they're not, they at least need to have some kind of oversight, some kind of regulatory framework. And that's what this bill seeks to do, saying you can't, if you're found to be deceptive, if you're purporting to provide medical services, you have to follow some kind of regulatory frameworks, or you can't get funded by the state. This bill, I almost feel like I need to do a trigger warning. If anyone has medical trauma, I do, I'll raise my hand, but I was shocked to find out that it is legal and common for medical students to be ordered to practice on unconscious people during surgery under anesthesia. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped bills because I saw Fiedler because she's on both. I'll go back to that one. So this bill would ban, the radical feminist agenda of 2023 is to ban non-consensual pelvic exams while you're under anesthesia. This bill is actually coming up for its first vote next week, so this is perfect timing to advocate, and I'll include all that in the follow-up information in the email that you'll get from Sherry. But I mean, you can see here, I don't even need to explain very much why this is horrific, right? It's common practice. Some states have already moved to ban it, about 8 that I'm aware of. It's just insane to me that this is even an issue in 2023, and of course is extremely important for reproductive, bodily autonomy and integrity. And then to pop back over to this bill, this is the #1 priority, a very important priority for expanding abortion access in Pennsylvania. Advanced practitioner clinicians provide abortion care in 22 states. Pennsylvania still enforces a physician-only rule that is ideologically based. There's no medical reason for that. So passing this would significantly expand abortion access, especially if and when that mifepristone lawsuit comes down and there's even, that a national effect despite Pennsylvania law. Still having abortion legal. Hop over to, these are bad bills that hopefully won't make too much progress this session, but I am a huge advocate of make noise, no matter what the demographics and composition of the legislature. They need to know what we think. We see we're staying silent into, because, I can't tell you how many times over the years I heard, Governor Wolf will veto it. He'll veto it. And that is not helpful because our lawmakers, guess who's talking to them every single day? Our opponents, right? So we need to be also. The one is the sports bill that they have rubber stamped everywhere around the country, this awful attack on transgender children and gender expansive children, a 6-week abortion ban reintroduced by Rep Borowitz, and then a version of the Florida Don't Say Gay bill is also here. Just a little, my little thing about these, anytime you see parents' rights, it's time to pop the hood, right? Let's do the math. Parents' rights, while we're regressing, while there's no women's rights equals men's rights. All right, little formula that might help out when we look at these efforts. And then lastly, I just want to reground us. Hopefully you are aware of this litigation, but this is a lawsuit that Women's Law Project with David S. Cohen argued, initially filed in 2019, and it challenges the ARHC, stands for Allegheny Reproductive Health Center. That's a freestanding abortion provider in Allegheny County versus Pennsylvania DHS. We are challenging the state's discriminatory ban on Medicaid coverage of abortion care. But what's important and that's a huge barrier to abortion care in Pennsylvania, so it's very important. But what's even more perhaps important to understand about it is that we all are talking about the state constitutional efforts, right? The great news out of Kansas and Kentucky, the 5 or 6 ballot initiatives that went well, and every day in the news also the importance of state Supreme Courts. This one hasn't gotten that much attention recently because we did it before all this. So filed in 2019 as part of this litigation, one of the asks is we asked the, I get to say we, even though I'm not the attorney, asked the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court to explicitly affirm that our bodily reproductive autonomy rights are protected by the Pennsylvania state constitution. And so that could have a transformative effect and provide Pennsylvanians even more protection than under Roe. So, so just to be aware of that litigation, the ruling could come down at any time. It could come down tomorrow, it could come down next year. We argued before the Supreme Court in the fall. So that is an active and important moving piece whenever we talk about abortion access and reproductive rights in Pennsylvania.
Well, we're running out of time, but in the chat, I'm sure we have a lot of questions.
We had one particularly really good one that,
Okay, go ahead.
Someone was
Thank you.
asking about, which was, you know, if their local representatives are, you know, not supportive of reproductive rights, what is the most effective way that they can take action on this legislation specifically, they were asking?
Well, I think it doesn't matter if they're supportive or not. Okay, one way I would go, and Fair Districts did a great job of this, is there is to go to the committee where the bill is being introduced. I currently don't have bill numbers, but quite a few of the other slide decks show bill numbers. Mine will be coming up. We're just getting Shapiro's team on board before we move it forward. That being said, you can look up a bill and see which committee it's in. The bills around these topics tend to be in health. The health committee is chaired by Dan Frankel, and there's a co-chair, Rab, is that her name, Rab? And when you contact every member within that committee, they will be taking a vote on that bill. It is effective, because even if you're targeting someone who's not willing to vote for it, they are seeing how many people are contacting them about the bill. So don't be discouraged that you happen to have a representative that's not on board. Continue to contact them and the senator as well, who might not be on board. And then as the bill moves, which, you know, we'll make sure you have updates on bill numbers, they should contact every single person on the committee. How do you find that? All you have to do is Google PA, House of Representatives, Health Committee, and it will list every single representative in that committee, as well as the chairs.
Someone was asking just for a brief recap again of how the TANF money gets to the CPC or to the AACs. Could someone just give like a real quick overview? We did a lot of fast information there.
Yeah, so there's state managed programs. They're called alternatives to abortion programs. And that is how they are able to direct TANF dollars through the alternatives to abortion programs to grant funds to individual anti-abortion centers or crisis pregnancy centers throughout the state. Tara, do you want to add anything else?
No, that's right. It's listed. I mean, literally, you'll see it. It's in the budget. It'll be in the budget. We want it to not be in the budget. So, but perfect timing. Pennsylvania going into appropriations and budget hearings. They need to hear from everybody now that doesn't want CPC funded.
So thank you, everyone. And we will look through the chat. And if we see other questions, I'll reach out and get the answers, and we'll send them in the follow-up. So thank you very much, Representative Shusterman, Ashley, and Tara. It's been very educational, and I do feel hopeful. So let's all make sure we do our call to action, reach out to your elected officials, and let them know you don't want your money used this way. Thank you very much.